In the mid-1970s, 20 million Americans would tune in on Saturday nights to watch the #1 show on television, All in the Family. One of the stars of the show was a young actor named Rob Reiner, who played an ultra-liberal grad student and was the foil to the main character, Archie Bunker. Rob Reiner was a household name, and that fame and prominence grew to even greater heights in Hollywood as he became a preeminent movie director, responsible for such iconic films like When Harry Met Sally, The Princess Bride, and A Few Good Men. Rob's first marriage was to fellow actor and director Penny Marshall. Rob adopted Penny's daughter, Tracy. His second marriage was to Michelle Singer. Together, they had 3 children, Jake, Nick, and Romy. Together, they lived in a $10 million sprawling mansion in the Brentwood neighborhood of Los Angeles. And it was inside that home where Rob and Michele would be violently killed.
One of these special allegations is that the murder was committed with a deadly weapon or a knife.
On the day of the murders, Rob and Michele went to a Christmas party at Conan O'Brien's house. Their 32-year-old son, Nick, came along with them. There was an incident at the party, and Nick left. It was later that night that Rob and Michele were killed. Investigators moved quickly and arrested a family member.
Evidence gathered led to the arrest of their son, Nick Reiner, who was taken into custody later that night without incident in the Exposition Park section of our city.
Now the world is watching and wondering what happened behind the gates of that mansion, and why did it end with the violent murders of Rob and Michele Reiner? Tonight, for the next hour, we will go in depth into this tragic case, looking at the evidence, the motive, the family dynamics, and what will happen inside the courtroom. This is the Reiner Family Murders, a Court TV special. I'm Vinny Politan. Thank you so much for joining us. For this next hour, we will take you in depth into the case that everyone is talking about. Shockwaves around Hollywood, shockwaves around the world, the brutal murders of Rob Reiner and his wife, Michele. Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas will be with us all night. Right now, he's joining us live outside the LA County Superior Courthouse. Good evening, Cody. What can you tell us? Because I want to begin this story by talking about the party, the Christmas party at Conan O'Brien's house. What can you tell us about it?
Well, Vinny, we've heard a lot come out about this party as the days have moved forward this week, this Christmas party at Conan O'Brien's house, where a lot of A-listers were the Saturday night going into the Sunday where Rob Reiner and Michele were found stabbed into their homes. This would have been the night before. We know Rob was there, his wife Michele was there, along with their 32-year-old son, Nick Reiner, as well. And I went out to the area where Conan O'Brien's house is just to get a better feel for the neighborhood. Take a look at this. We're here in Pacific Palisades, California, about 2.5 miles away from the Brentwood neighborhood in Los Angeles, about 2.5 miles away from the Brentwood residence where Rob and Michele Reiner were found stabbed to death. But where exactly am I in the Pacific Palisades? Well, if you look right over here to the right, behind all of this shrubbery, all of these tall bushes, behind there is Conan O'Brien's house. Now, why is this house important? This is reportedly where Rob, Michele, and their son Nick, who's now accused in their murders, were Saturday night, the night before Rob and Michele were found stabbed in their home. This is where they were at a Christmas party at Conan's house. Now, we've heard a lot of speculation about what's come out of this party. We've heard that Rob and Nick got into a very loud argument, which after Rob and Michele ended up leaving the party embarrassed. We also heard that Nick got into it with actor and comedian Bill Hader after Bill told him that he was having a private conversation and told Nick to ease up and back up, and Nick apparently didn't like that and stared at him and then walked off strangely. We also heard that Rob and Michele were evidently telling people in this party that they were at their wits' end with Nick's behavior, with his drug addiction, and just with his behavior all around. Now, we don't know officially what that loud argument was about between Nick and his father, Rob, but we've heard that it could have been about Nick's refusal to undergo more treatment for his drug addiction, even after 17 stints in rehab. So, of course, this is all speculation circulating on the internet. But again, over here behind these tall bushes, that is Conan O'Brien's house, one of the last places where Rob and Michele were seen alive before they were found by their daughter, Romy, stabbed to death in their home. Now, Vinny, you heard me briefly mention their actor and comedian Bill Hader, who evidently got into it with Nick inside that party. Well, we have new images obtained by the New York Post in the days following the news coming out about Rob and Michele being stabbed to death. In these photos, we see Bill Hader on what looks to be a tense phone call following this news coming out this week. Now, we don't know who he's on the phone with, what the nature of that conversation was, but again, he does look a little bit tense in that phone call. Now, Vinny, we're learning new things as recently as today about what was going on inside that party. We've learned, according to Daily Mail, Vinny, that, quote, Conan O'Brien stopped a friend from calling 911 during an explosive fight between Rob and Nick Reiner at the comedian's Christmas party just hours before the director's son allegedly cut his parents' throats, guests have revealed. So that's an interesting development as this investigation and this case unfolds, Vinny. Now, we have also learned here recently that Nick Reiner, in the weeks leading up to these stabbings, was diagnosed with a mental illness. According to a TMZ report, it says, quote, Nick Reiner was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And in the weeks leading up to the murder of his parents, Rob and Michele Reiner, the meds he was taking made him erratic and dangerous. So, Vinny, I'm sure those meds, coupled with his history of hard drug abuse and drug addiction, was not the most ideal combo. But, Vinny, as I look over that report, it seems like it opens up a defense strategy of conceding that Nick may have done this, but pleading guilty by reason of insanity.
Yeah, I think you're right on, Cody. That is a game changer in all of this. Cody's going to stick with us throughout this hour. Let's bring in our special guest. Joining us tonight, senior investigative reporter at the Daily Mail, Dana Kennedy's with us, and celebrity psychologist Dr. Jeffrey Gardier. Great to have you both here. Dana, let me start first with some of this news about what's happening at this party. It seemed people were concerned about Nick's actions, so concerned that they wanted to call 911.
Yes, and one thing that hasn't been reported yet, we'll have this over the weekend in another story, is that I understand that Nick's sister Romy was there, Romy Reiner, who's his younger sister. And of course, in so many families, when you have a problem child, the other kids, you know, kind of get short shrift. So it hasn't even come out yet that she was there, but that's my understanding. And yes, I have another source who knew someone that was there and said that he was acting really strangely all night. And the fact that Conan O'Brien didn't want to call the police is kind of aligns with who Conan O'Brien is, who's truly one of the nicest guys in Hollywood, one of the most scandal-free guys in Hollywood. The same can be said for Bill Hader. I don't know Bill Hader personally, but I know someone who does, and said he already has a lot of anxiety issues, and this is really, really tearing him up because, you know, they were so not at fault, and this, you know, unfortunately very troubled young man came into the party and also was wearing a hoodie, was not dressed in this sort of semi-formal wear that was kind of assigned to people at the party, and he just, you know, from the time he got there, from what I understand, was a real disturbance there.
All right, Dr. Jeffrey Gardier, all of this new information now that we're learning about what's happening in the party in the moments before everything that happens back at the house, the killing of Rob and Michele. We're learning schizophrenia. We're learning, as Dana said, he's wearing a hoodie at a party, at a formal party, an A-list event. And then people were so concerned, they wanted to call 911. What does this all tell you?
Well, I think the schizophrenia diagnosis is a game changer. I think what we have to think about, or at least ponder, is when was the schizophrenia diagnosis given? Is this something that is inherent in his DNA, or was it a psychosis that developed over time due to the continued use or even side effects of the substance abuse? But I think more than anything else, it tells us that they were dealing with a lot with this young man. And we talked about this a few days ago, Vinny, that the possibility of substance abuse disorder along with a mental illness, and then how do the two of those things affect one another? It certainly makes the situation much, much worse. And as Cody talked about, the mix of illicit substances with the possibility of the medication he was taking for the schizophrenia would be a very, very horrible mix.
Yeah, Dana, when we think about this event, right? It's almost legendary. Conan's Christmas party. You want to get the invite,
right.
Like it's the invite this time of year out in Hollywood. And to think that the Reiners asked to bring him because they were afraid of leaving him home. To me, that speaks volumes. Rob and Michele wanted to do everything, it seems, to try to protect their son, include their son, and keep him from danger.
You know, this is such, Vinny, this is such a complicated, sensitive situation. You know, the schizophrenia diagnosis was literally rolled out almost on a silver platter yesterday by, you know, not even yesterday, TMZ today gave a very, very formal announcement of this, saying sources directly tied to Nick Reiner had told them that. Well, we know who those sources are. He has one of the highest powered defense attorneys in America, Alan Jackson, $2,000 an hour. And, you know, we actually reported, reporter Josh Boswell at the Daily Mail early on had an article quoting Nick Reiner's yoga teacher, the family yoga teacher. When he was only 10 years old, the Reiners had this yoga teacher, and she said that Nick was so disruptive at age 10, coming in screaming, that she actually ended up wrote a book about this child. And she didn't, you know, name him, but she wrote about him because his behavior was so intense. And it seems very unusual to me that we've not heard anything about his schizophrenia till now, till age 32. I mean, normally, I'm not an expert, obviously, in mental health, but normally it's diagnosed in your late teens. You would have thought that, and, you know, as you know, Rob Reiner and his son did a movie called Being Charlie, very tightly based on Nick and his father and all Nick's trips to rehab. And there was nothing about schizophrenia in that film, and it has never been brought up until really yesterday. So this does seem pretty much like a defense strategy. And I also think it's going to shape the way we look at this story from now on. If we're told he has schizophrenia, that puts a whole new light on it. Oh. But I'm going to say the quiet part out loud. You really have that.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Jeffrey Gardier, we have about 45 seconds here. I'd like to hear your viewpoint of this, the history. If he's schizophrenic, should there be a long documented history of this, or at least signs of this?
Yeah, absolutely. And what we would see is my co-guest is absolutely right. We usually diagnose this in males. The onset is around 17, 18, what we see. So being that he's in his 30s, we would see more documentation. But of course, his records are private. And they are protected by confidentiality. But it really does speak to what Rob Reiner and Michele Reiner were dealing with, to have to try to manage someone who has the unfortunate diagnosis of schizophrenia, if that is a true diagnosis, and as well dealing with substance abuse issues. It's a nightmare for parents and certainly for the person dealing with that, actually having the schizophrenia and substance abuse.
Absolutely. Dr. Jeffrey Gardier, great to have you on. Thank you so much. Dana Kennedy's going to stick around. When we come back, we're going to take a look at the investigation and the arrest of Nick Reiner.
One of these special allegations is that the murder was committed with a deadly weapon or a knife.
I'm going to ask you a lot of intensely personal questions.
From the crime scene to the courtroom, this is Victim to Verdict.
Everyone has this heightened sense of anticipation.
What a day here at Court TV.
Fireworks both inside and outside the courthouse.
Let the cameras roll.
On December 14, 2025, LAPD officers from our West Los Angeles division responded to a death investigation at the 200 block of South Chadbourne Avenue, which is in the Brentwood section of Los Angeles. Upon entering the residence, they discovered the bodies of Mr. and Mrs. Reiner. Detectives from our Robbery Homicide Division Homicide Special Section immediately initiated a comprehensive investigation.
The arrest of their own son for this brutal, brutal murder. Let's head back out to Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas, who was in L.A. Cody, what do we know about Nick Reiner's movements around the time of the murders here?
Well, Vinny, we do know he made his way a ways from that Brentwood residence where his mother and father were found stabbed to death. We don't know if he got in a car or anything, but he was quite a bit away to be on foot. And we've seen several images and videos of him on foot like this one here, obtained by the New York Post. Now, this video here reportedly shows Nick Reiner eerily strolling near his parents' home in the hours before those murders took place, Vinny. So this would likely be after the party at Conan O'Brien's house, but again, before the stabbings. Now, Vinny, we also know at some point in the night or in the early morning hours of Sunday, he ended up in a hotel in Santa Monica before being arrested later on farther away at Exposition Park. And I went to both locations just to get a better feel of both of them. Take a look at this. So I'm standing across from the Pierside Hotel in Santa Monica. Now, what's important about this hotel? Well, now it's doubling as a second crime scene in this case against Nick Reiner. Of course, we know the crime scene in the Brentwood home, but this is where police say Nick Reiner checked in to this hotel at 4 a.m. on Sunday, allegedly following those murders. And police also say once they arrived to his room inside, once they gained access, they saw blood all throughout the shower and they saw bed sheets covering the windows. Now remember, this is not exactly where Nick Reiner got arrested. He got arrested in Exposition Park, but again, this is where police say he checked into after those alleged murders, and with all that blood evidence they say they saw, no doubt that this place will play a crucial part as this case and investigation continues to unfold. Here now in the Exposition Park area of Los Angeles, about 15 miles from the Brentwood neighborhood, the Brentwood residence where Rob and Michele Reiner were found stabbed to death in their homes. We're near the University of Southern California's campus going towards South Central LA. But what's important about this area here in Exposition Park, this is where police say Nick Reiner was taken into custody without incident. No attempts to flee, no attempts to fight back. Now, we do know that Nick has been very vocal about his struggles with addiction, his struggles with homelessness early on in his teen years. And upon talking to people out here in the area, they say this area can be very drug influenced. And if you look towards the street here, looking towards the neighborhood, we see it looks relatively normal, but we do see a few run-down buildings. And again, Nick being very vocal about his drug addictions, maybe this could have been an area he frequented before moving back in a guest home on his parents' property, his parents being Rob and Michele Reiner, who he's now accused of murdering. But again, this is the area where police say Nick was taken into custody without incident just hours after those alleged murders. And Vinny, we see here in another video obtained again by the New York Post, Nick Reiner's arrest in Exposition Park. Now, we see him near a crosswalk in this video. He throws his hands up as police approach him, again, without incident, no attempt to flee, no attempt to fight back. And Vinny, another interesting development came out today, reported to People magazine, actually. It says, quote, the bodies of Rob Reiner and Michele Singer Reiner have been returned to the Reiner family. The Los Angeles County medical examiner confirmed to People. So, Vinny, I don't know if that's quite a silver lining here for this family, but more so a small bookend into what's been a horrific last few days for them.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Cody. Still with me, senior investigative reporter at the Daily Mail, Dana Kennedy. And joining us now, former homicide detective, host of The Interview Room with Chris McDonough. Chris McDonough is with us. Dana, I want to clear, how clear is the timeline right now? Where are the missing pieces of where he was and what was happening?
I was just going to bring that up because we just heard that report. And what's confusing is we have heard that we think that the Reiners, Rob and Michele, left the Conan O'Brien party separately from Nick. We think that they left separately. But what is unclear is how could Nick Reiner have checked into that boutique hotel, the Pierside Hotel in Santa Monica, without any blood on him, but yet all the blood appear in the hotel room. And I'm not completely clear if he possibly checked into the hotel and then maybe went to his parents afterwards. I mean, that has not come out yet, but somebody interviewed the the desk attendants at the hotel that said they didn't see anything, not even cuts on his hand. So it wouldn't really make any sense to have then the people that came into the room afterwards say there was a shower full of blood. So that's really unclear to me. And also, I agree with your reporter. It looks like he took the LA Metro subway to SC to score. I mean, why would he possibly go there? It's not near his home, his family home. It's not near his Santa Monica hotel. It tells me he probably went there before. But I really think the timeline is really wonky, that we don't know the whole story yet.
Yeah, Chris McDonough, even if there is an insanity type of defense, prosecutors still have to prove their case, put the pieces together. What about this timeline? What about the hotel, the alleged blood in the hotel, and where he was? What sort of things are you looking at? What sort of things are raising questions for you about the evidence in this case?
Well, you know, Vinny, there's going to be a couple of key points where the investigators are going to concentrate on. One is his consciousness of guilt, meaning, is he able to make decisions? And if he is making decisions, are they clear and concise? And then, of course, the second is his pattern of life, i.e., did he make decisions pre-incident, during the incident, and post-incident? And then the second point is going to be all of his behavior. Did society believe it was going to be, inappropriate? And if Nick at any time showed indications of that and or tells investigators, yeah, I knew, something to that effect, then the insanity defense is going to be quite a battle. So far as the blood is concerned, he's wearing dark clothing. He could have had the murder weapon in that backpack. And if he did have that murder weapon with him, he could have cleaned it at the bathtub, and that could explain some of the blood evidence.
And Dana, as we try to understand the big crime scene now back at the home, you have to understand the home. This isn't a huge, sprawling home. Do we have any idea of where people are situated throughout? And it looks like there's more than one structure on the compound.
Well, I know it's a 6-bedroom home, and there's a guest house because that's where Nick Reiner was living. So I think it was, they call it a mansion, of course, but I think it was, a very, very big Brentwood home. I don't really think it's massively palatial. I think it's just a big, expensive, beautiful home. It was Norman Lear's home, and it was always Rob Reiner's dream to live there. And again, from what we know, they apparently were in their beds. But that also raises a slight question, Vinny, because we hear that Romy Reiner, the daughter who came to the house after the massage therapist who had a session scheduled with Rob said they weren't answering. And we hear from police, I believe, that she ran out of the house, but she didn't see her mother. So I'm not sure. Maybe they have, they could have a huge bedroom, a huge bed, and it just wasn't obvious or what. But that's also another question mark that we haven't answered yet.
Yeah, and Chris, 2 victims with knife wounds. We've seen it before, obviously, right? But there has to be certain types of circumstances to be able to wrangle and control 2 people with just a knife.
Yeah, and so that is going to beg the question, right? Were they getting ready for bed? Was this an ambush attack on both mom and dad? And then, of course, what's going to be the brutality in relationship to what will the autopsy tell us? Because that will also show us the intensity, and it will also show us, the fact that, post-homicide, with all of that rage, he was still able to get out of there secretly without being captured.
All right, big thanks, Dana Kennedy from the Daily Mail. Great work as always. Chris McDonough, your insight is amazing. The interview room with Chris McDonough, thank you. All right, when we come back, what was the dynamic between Nick Reiner and his parents?
Our hearts go out to the entire Reiner family. There are very, very complex and serious issues that are associated with this case. Those need to be thoroughly, but very carefully dealt with.
So at approximately 3:40 this afternoon, Los Angeles police officers, along with the Los Angeles City Fire Department, responded to the 200 block of Chadbourne Avenue here in the city of Brentwood. Upon arrival, they determined that there were 2 deceased individuals inside of the residence. We're going to try and speak to every family member that we can to get to the facts of this investigation.
And this is a story, an investigation, a case that's really all in the family, like literally. What I want to do right now is show you some photos of the Reiner family. And one thing that sticks out like a sore thumb is Nick. When you look at some of these pictures, you know, you've got a picture here with, well, they're all flying by me very quickly. But as you look at the pictures, you'll notice many times Nick is dressed differently than everyone else in the family. This one, all the way on the right, that's Nick. Everyone else is kind of dressed for the moment, and he's not. There's a Spinal Tap premiere where they're at just a few days ago, and Nick is in a hoodie, and everybody else is dressed up for a movie premiere. So it's something that stuck out to us. I want to bring in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas, who's joining us from outside the LA County Superior Courthouse tonight. What can you tell us about the relationship now, right? Because this is what it's really all about, the relationship between Nick Reiner and his parents.
Well, yeah, Vinny, one thing that we do know is that they tried to help him extensively, especially with his early drug addictions in his life, starting early on in his teen years, as early as 15. We know he did almost 20 stints in rehab. And Vinny, according to a TMZ report, one of those facilities where he was getting rehab cost about $70,000 a month for inpatient treatment. So safe to say that they put their best foot forward in trying to help Nick with those struggles. Now, we know that Nick has been very vocal about those addiction struggles and his struggles with homelessness early on in his teen years. He even went as far as to co-write a movie with his father, Rob, called Being Charlie, that was loosely based on his early struggles in life. And Vinny, what I want to do now is have our viewers take a listen to a clip from an interview from Rob and Nick talking about this movie from the AOL Build YouTube series. Take a listen.
I wasn't really that shy about including some of the bad stuff I did, because a lot of people do things that are pretty unsavory when they're going through that. But in terms of making it a narrative, of course, it's not my life, but it needs to be constructed into a story.
The fact that we were dealing with, you know, things that Nick had gone through and how I had related to it and how his mother had related to it, it forced us to have to, it forced me to have to see more clearly and understand more deeply what Nick had gone through.
Vinny, since we're talking about it, let's watch a clip from the trailer of that movie, Being Charlie. This was posted to YouTube by Rotten Tomatoes Indie YouTube channel. Take a look at it.
Drink. If you continue to refuse to accept the disease that put you here, you will continue to be a repeat offender.
Don't you mean repeat customer?
I love him. I don't love him. No.
You've had plenty of choices, Charlie. Rehab or jail. You know, quite a wide selection there. One of us had to keep him safe.
For him or for you?
I can't stay here anymore, okay? This place is like a prison.
It's not even close. But don't worry. If you're not dead, you'll probably end up there anyway.
And so, Vinny, most recently we know that Nick moved back in on his parents' property in a guest house. That's Rob and Michele Reiner. I took a walk through the Brentwood neighborhood in front of their home. Take a look at this. We're here now in this Brentwood, Los Angeles neighborhood. Now, this area is usually known for being very safe, very swanky, very quiet, and home to many A-list celebrities, but now it is home to a brutal crime scene. That's because over my back shoulder here, right over these gates, right over this tall shrubbery, that is the home where Rob and Michele Reiner were found stabbed to death. And the accused killer, their own 32-year-old son, Nick Reiner. Now, for our loyal Court TV viewers that have been with us for some years now, you know this neighborhood from the trial of last century, the murder trial against O.J. Simpson. Now, we're only about 1.5 miles away from where Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman were found murdered in 1994. Now, if you have a look around this neighborhood, you look down the street in either direction, you see that this neighborhood is pretty private. There's gates on every home, there's access codes to get into every gate, and there's tall bushes blocking the view from the street of people coming through here, through the neighborhood. So these homes are not easily accessible by just anyone. But again, in the hours following those stabbings, the Reiner son, Nick Reiner, was arrested, now charged with a crime that has shaken this community to its core. Now, Vinny, we may not know the exact dynamics of what exactly was going on behind those closed doors, but I still think it's safe to say that Rob and Michele Reiner and probably the rest of the family put their best foot forward in helping Nick with his early on drug addictions.
All right, Cody Thomas, stand by. Let's bring in our guest joining us, host of the Naughty But Nice podcast, Rob Shooter. Rob, thank you so much for joining us. I know you had an opportunity. You had sort of a coffee meetup with Nick Reiner.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's about 5-6 years ago. I was in LA and we had coffee together. He had a project that he was trying to get up and running. He'd struggled. He'd really struggled trying to find his footing in Hollywood. He co-wrote that movie that his dad produced, but nothing really since then. And so he wanted to meet and talk about Hollywood, talk about his script, talk about how I could help him. I wanted to talk about his famous family and what it was like growing up there. It was a tricky meeting. He turned up late. I remember he didn't smell really very good at all. In fact, he smelled terrible. He looked really disheveled. He looked like he had just woken up. And he was annoyed. He got angry with the staff when they got his order wrong. And so it wasn't a very pleasant meeting. I remember walking away from it thinking the only thing that makes Nick interesting is the one thing he's trying to away from, which was his family. He did not want to talk about his family. He made it clear that he wanted to stand on his own 2 feet, that he wanted to be a big deal in the movie business. And yeah, I'd go as far as to say maybe even a little bit of a chip on his shoulder.
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways it goes in Hollywood, right? Like Rob Reiner, his father was the son of an iconic figure, and he embraced it and rode with it. Nick had his issues. So didn't want to talk at all about his family. How about Hollywood in general? Were there rumblings about Nick? Was he on the radar at all?
Yeah, it's a good question. Everybody knew. If I knew that Nick was troubled, I live in New York, all the insiders, everybody that I speak to in Hollywood knew Nick. He was around. His dad dragged him everywhere with him. He dragged him to the Conan O'Brien party just the night before. I was told from 2 people at that party, when Nick turned up, there was a groan. There was like, oh, he's here again. This was not a teenage boy. He was 32 years old, and to be dragged to parties that he was not invited to. His mom and dad were invited, he wasn't. And so there was a real sense that he was troubled, he was difficult, he wasn't very pleasant to be around. But I think this goes to show you the power of his parents. People tolerated Nick because of his dad. People put up with Nick because of his family. And so it was not... Hollywood knew. Anybody in Hollywood, I don't think anybody knew that this was going to happen, but Hollywood knew that he was a really troubled individual, and not just troubled, rather unpleasant. He made it very difficult to like him.
Yeah, that's the rough combo, right? Someone's troubled and there's a level of sympathy because it's a really sad case. But if someone is abrasive and obnoxious, it doesn't help. And on the other hand, when we think about the relationship between, father and son, it seems that Rob is trying anything and everything and trying different approaches and trying to help his son, and is just kind of like unable to do it.
Yeah, totally. These parents love their son. In fact, I spoke to a source just yesterday, a really close family friend, and they told me that if Rob and Michele were alive today, they would forgive him. They wouldn't forgive the crime, but they would forgive their son. They wouldn't forgive the sin, but they would forgive the sinner. They loved him. They knew he had issues. They were trying so hard to help him. He had been in and out of rehab 15, 16 times. These rehabs were really expensive. One was $70,000. He was living rent-free in their pool house. That seems like it's just a shed in the garden. No, it's not. It's a beautiful, beautiful home. It has a 1-bedroom in there. It has showers in there. It has a kitchen in there. And so he was living with them. So as parents, they really did try everything they could, and the end result is just heartbreaking.
Absolutely. Rob Shooter, Naughty But Nice podcast. Thank you so, so much. Great to see you. Coming up next, what can we expect from Nick Reiner's trial?
These charges carry a maximum sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole or the death penalty.
Brutal killing sent shockwaves through Hollywood.
Rob Reiner and his wife murdered.
Court TV takes you inside the investigation.
Their own son charged with their murders.
As a community mourns, and a troubled son is now a defendant in a double murder.
We will commit ourselves to bringing their murderer to justice.
The Reiner Family Murders, a Court TV special, tonight, 8/7 Central on Court TV.
Today I'm here to announce that our office will be filing charges against Nick Reiner, who is accused of killing his parents, actor-director Rob Reiner, and photographer-producer Michele Singer Reiner. These charges will be 2 counts of first-degree murder with a special circumstance of multiple murders. He also faces a special allegation that he personally used a dangerous and deadly weapon, that being a knife. These charges carry a maximum sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole or the death penalty.
It doesn't get more serious than this. Potential death penalty case. You heard it from the prosecutor himself. He'll make a decision on how they want to proceed, but everything is at stake here. At a minimum, life without the possibility of parole. Let's head back out to Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas, who's live in L.A. tonight. Cody, tell us about Nick Reiner's first appearance in the courthouse where you are tonight.
Well, Vinny, it was very brief. Only about a minute and a few seconds. We heard Nick Reiner speak very briefly, saying, yes, Your Honor, to agreeing to waive his right to a speedy arraignment. And Vinny, due to a judge's court order, we were not allowed to take any still images or show Nick Reiner on video behind that glass panel he was sitting behind. But what we do have is court sketches. And in those court sketches, you can see that he's wearing one of those suicide prevention vests. Again, he's sitting behind that glass panel near his defense counsel. Now, who is his defense counsel? None other than high-profile defense attorney Alan Jackson, who we saw plenty of during the Karen Reed murder trial and the Karen Reed murder retrial. No stranger to us here at the network, Alan Jackson. He's based out here in Los Angeles, represented Harvey Weinstein, Kevin Spacey, lots of big-name people that he's represented. Now, he took a little bit of time to speak to media following those brief proceedings, talking about how this case is very complex and needs to be looked at very thoroughly in order for justice to prevail. Take a listen to this.
This is a devastating tragedy that has befallen the Reiner family. We all recognize that. Our hearts go out to the entire Reiner family. There are very, very complex and serious issues that are associated with this case. These need to be thoroughly, but very carefully dealt with and examined and looked at and analyzed. We ask that during this process, you allow the system to move forward in the way that it was designed to move forward. Not with a rush to judgment, not with jumping to conclusions, but with restraint and with dignity and with the respect that this system and this process deserves and that the family deserves.
Now, Vinny, Alan Jackson did not speak on how he became attached to this case or who was fronting those high-profile legal bills, but it will be interesting to see how this case plays out with him on the defense team. And, of course, we'll see Reiner back in court on January 7th when that arraignment was moved to January 7th of 2026.
All right, Cody Thomas in Los Angeles. Great reporting all night. Thanks so much. Let's bring in our guest here with us, criminal defense attorney David Yannetti. You know him well, folks. He worked with Alan Jackson on the Karen Reed case, spent hours, days, weeks, months, and years with Alan Jackson. Also with us, former L.A. County Deputy Public Defender Philip Dubé, who worked at the same courthouse with Alan Jackson for years when Alan Jackson was a prosecutor. Great to have you both here. David, let me start with you. News coming out through TMZ about schizophrenia. being part of it. Is this where you think Alan Jackson is going to go in the defense of Nick Reiner? Get into the mental state, the mental history, and more of the why this happened as opposed to who did it?
Right. Well, you know, Vinny, I read that article and came to the same conclusion that it sounds as though you did. You know, schizophrenia is a devastating mental illness. It sounds like he's had it for quite a while. It sounds like his medication was recently changed. And it sounds like the medication, along with his mental illness, may have made him dangerous. So, you know, I wouldn't be surprised at all if, you know, that is part of the complexity of the case that Alan mentioned after the arraignment.
Let me ask you, Philip Dubé, what is this trial going to be about?
Oh, I think health and wellness is going to be on trial here, Vinny. There is a tremendous intersection here between what I call the polysubstance abuse patient, or in this case, criminal defendant, the mentally ill defendant, the defendant who might be on the spectrum, the defendant who might have a personality disorder, and you know, somebody who has gone untreated or perhaps has had adverse interaction of the drugs. And I think what has happened, not just to Nick, but to many people living with these co-occurring disorders, is that unless and until you have treatment providers who work as a team cohesively, almost like a mini village of providers, and you only treat one of those co-occurring disorders in isolation, you're never going to get better. What's going to happen is you're only going to treat one of the ailments and you'll be spiraling as to the other ones. So what you need is you need health and wellness professionals who can work together to make sure that the medication doses are proper, or that they're even indicated, that there is even a proper diagnosis of any mental disorder or mental defect, and that certainly that any addiction from polysubstance abuse is being addressed, and that any defect or disorder that's on the autism spectrum is being addressed as well, because otherwise, like I said earlier, you're never going to get well.
Right.
And if
he
you
clearly
have
wasn't well, like his wellness, like you just look at the pictures, you look at his eyes, you can tell.
Yes.
David Yannetti, let me ask you, if in fact there's new medication involved here, is the defense, because the defense, I mean, I've watched trials for years. They're always pointing somewhere, right? Is the finger potentially pointed at doctors? Is the finger potentially pointed at side effects of a medication and perhaps the company that's producing the medication? Could that be part of this trial?
Sure, but you know, it's not as though you need to point the finger at doctors. You know, it's more that what state was he in as a result of the treatment that he got and the medication that he was taking and the mental illness that he apparently suffered from. You know, in our system, you know, if somebody cannot, as a result of a mental defect, you know, appreciate the wrongfulness of his conduct or be able to distinguish between right and wrong, then, you know, under the law, he's not guilty by reason of insanity. It's a perfectly legitimate, long-time, well-respected defense, because we don't want to, you know, jail or commit somebody who's not in his right mind. So these are all live issues. As Alan said, the system will play it out. It's designed to do that. And, you know, people should keep an open mind about what really was going on.
Well, we learned how to keep an open mind during the Karen Reed saga, so I'm sure folks are keeping their open mind. Philip Dubé, we only have about 25 seconds here. He fled. That's bad. Insanity, right? People who know they did something wrong will flee.
I don't see it as flight at all. What I'm seeing is somebody who is crashing from the effects of some type of a drug binge. And I think it was reported that he was chronically using methamphetamine. And there's an expression in the meth world, it's called chasing the dragon. And what that means is you keep increasing the dose to try to recreate that initial euphoria you had when you started. And that could be where he was, just wandering like a nomad.
We are out of time, Philip Dubé. I hate cutting off Philip Dubé, but the music's playing, that's the signal. Philip Dubé, David Yannetti, thank you so much. We appreciate it. And as we leave you tonight, thank you so much for watching. Some images of the Reiner family.